October 25th, 1994.
"50 years after it dropped the atom bomb over Hiroshima, a new firestorm over the Enola Gay.
All World War II veterans in the Enola Gay have been prostituted to make a political statement about the horrors of atomic warfare.
I'm shocked that it's the military groups that are trying to use the anniversary to continue the myth that we were justified in dropping the bomb.
Tonight, fighting over history, the fight over the Enola Gay.
This is ABC News Nightline. Substituting for Ted Koppel and reporting from Washington, Aaron Brown.
The idea must have seemed pretty straightforward. Design an exhibition to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the atomic bomb attack on Hiroshima. Display the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped that first bomb. Set out pictures and artifacts and documents from the time. Open up in May of next year and give life to a 50-year-old moment in history. The devil, as they say, was in the details. As soon as the Air and Space Museum at the Smithsonian released the 500-page script for the exhibition, critics charged the project turned history on its head. The Japanese became the victims, the Americans the aggressors. Americans should feel bad, not good, about ending the war with the bomb. When veterans groups and members of Congress went on the attack, the Smithsonian retreated. The script was rewritten, then rewritten again and again. Tomorrow, the 5th draft will be released. Tonight, we'll talk with two people at the center of the debate. But first, how we got to script number 5 in the first place. Here's correspondent Deborah Amos.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy.
August 6th, 1945. President Harry Truman announced the end of one era and the beginning of a new age. His decision to drop the atomic bomb opened a moral debate unsettled to this day.
I saw a flash that was just a white flash, brighter than anything I'd ever seen, that just obliterated that whole light blue sky at 30,000 feet.
Charles Sweeney was 25 years old when he flew alongside the Enola Gay, part of the squadron that dropped a 10,000-pound atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima.
As I made my turn, I was thinking of the hope that it would shorten the war.
3 days later, Sweeney would drop a second bomb on Nagasaki. For many in the World War II generation, these images of unspeakable devastation were tempered by joy at the Japanese surrender and the lives saved by the ending of the war. 50 years later, the decision to drop the bomb is at the center of this bitter and emotional debate as the Air and Space Museum prepares to display for the first time the Enola Gay. It's a struggle between those who study history and those who experienced it.
I can't believe that they would create such an abomination. You know, it's certainly un-American. And it's derogatory of the American culture. And I would add, if I got on my high horse, that it might be close to treason.
I knew that this exhibition was going to be one that would be very emotional for many people who participated, who've thought about it a long time. Some of them have lived with it for 50 years.
We want to present as best we can multiple views of that history, not a singular view of one or another or a third party.
It took more than a decade of restoration, many years to develop the text for an accompanying 5-part exhibition, and just a few months for veterans groups to organize and tear apart the museum's 500-page script, a word-by-word struggle to shape the story of the Enola Gay for the next generation. Veterans groups and newspaper editorials charged America's most popular museum with political correctness in portraying the Japanese as victims. They demanded more attention to Allied casualties and Japanese brutality. In a long and angry critique, the Air Force Association objected to this sentence: For most Americans, it was a war of vengeance. For most Japanese, it was a war to defend their unique culture against Western imperialism. The sentence has been dropped. The American Legion, the nation's largest veterans group, was angered by a part of the exhibition titled Ground Zero, a display of artifacts and photos of death and devastation.
In the exhibit, the artifacts were all pieces of clothing from young people. Young girl, her sandal. A boy, his coat.
I think the inclusion of artifacts from a variety of different people would have told a more complete story. Perhaps wouldn't have led you to the conclusion that just women and children's clothing would lead you to.
Surprised and stung by the criticism, the Smithsonian all but eliminated a section on the post-war arms race, dropped some of the most graphic pictures of suffering from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, added a whole new section on the Pacific War, and hoped that the changes satisfied their critics. But the American Legion was still fuming last week, a day before a scheduled meeting with museum staff.
All World War II veterans in the Enola Gay have been prostituted to make a political statement about the horrors of atomic warfare.
Veterans Herman Harrington and Hugh Dagley have already sat through marathon meetings with museum officials, checking the script line by line, word by word. But for them, the controversy's not over until the Smithsonian addresses their core concern, that Truman's only reason for dropping the bomb was to save American lives.
The dropping of the atom bomb saved my life because I was in a replacement depot being sent to Japan in readiness for an invasion.
Is the bottom line for you that the exhibit must say that the atomic bomb ended the war early and saved lives?
Yes.
That's the bottom line, yes. Because that's what happened.
And if it doesn't?
It's not accurate. And we won't like it.
There will be a number of places where we in the Legion will not have the same views, and we will simply have to agree or disagree. Agree to disagree. And that's just going to be a fact of life.
For the veterans, the 50th anniversary is a powerful commemoration. It's the last chance to pass on the memories of their sacrifice. The Smithsonian now admits that their early scripts lack this context. For Edward Linenthal, a specialist on national wartime commemorations and a museum advisor, the battle to redress the balance has become a litmus test for American patriotism.
This constitutes to me a very dangerous precedent for the way we do public history, that powerful pressure groups, aided by members of Congress who now apparently fancy themselves historians and curators as well as public servants, can, through pressure, through innuendo, change the nature of how we do history.
Hallelujah! John Deere, a Jesuit priest, was one of a group of anti-war activists that met with Smithsonian curators. Another contingent that demands a voice in the countdown to the 50th anniversary.
They have created an exhibit that's going to continue the myth that what we did was right, it was wrong. We're going to hold an alternative exhibit on the sidewalk in front of the Air and Space Museum with pictures and photos of the victims in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, and pictures from Nagasaki, and say, this is what the Pentagon and the American Legion don't want you to see.
For the moment, no one is happy. And from Japan, the mayor of Hiroshima calls for reflection, not for justification. The dispute is likely to continue until the exhibition opens in May and beyond, as the nation commemorates the final chapter of the Second World War. For Nightline, this is Deborah Amos in Washington.
When we come back, we'll be joined by the head of the Smithsonian and by the commander of the American Legion.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Sprint.
You run a great place to visit, so lots of people call, but the people taking orders can't keep up at all. When customers hear, "Please hold," what you're selling goes unsold.
Sprint Business had a real solution for Taos Valley Resorts. Enhanced 800 service reroutes calls instantly, so every customer hears
Taos Valley Resorts. Sprint helped us increase reservations, so we're seeing more profits. And that's why I'm in business in the first place.
Call Sprint Business. We help business do more business.
When something fresh comes into your life at the exact moment you're ready for it, it's not coincidence. Aurora by Oldsmobile. See what happens when you demand better? Aurora.
No matter what happens anymore, it seems somebody's going to sue.
Everybody's a damn victim.
Everyone thinks they're entitled. Boy, has America changed. John Stossel investigates The Blame Game, an ABC News special Wednesday.
In the past 2 years, over 140,000 people switched to Corolla. And if you think that's something, your Toyota dealer's out to switch thousands more with incredible lease deals on the 95s. For just $189 a month, you can drive a brand new Corolla. Just $189 for the car that's been a benchmark for quality for over 25 years. See the 1995 Corolla at your Toyota dealer now.
Amy O'Neill, dance teacher. Ari Sanchez, master carpenter. Megan Kwan, heart specialist. Christopher Nolan.
You're looking at the future, a future made brighter by a change in attitude. You see, more and more Americans are deciding against abortion. And when you think what this means to our future, you could say it's a small miracle. Life, what a beautiful choice.
Joining us from our Washington studios now as Secretary of the Smithsonian, Michael Heyman is the person who runs that massive institution. And William Detweiler is the National Commander of the American Legion. He's attended several of the contentious meetings with the Smithsonian over this. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Mr. Heyman, you got yourself in quite a mess here today that seems to extend beyond the Enola Gay. The Wall Street Journal today said about the Smithsonian generally that its exhibitions are vehicles for political re-education. It sarcastically writes that its moral education department wants Americans to feel bad about American achievements. What in the world is going on here?
Oh, I think that's horribly overstated. I think what's happened is that the Smithsonian once was a place where only objects were shown with a small label. And over the last 10, 12 years, a number of shows have occurred, exhibitions that have been curated, that have been interpretive. And each time that any portion of the show is inconsistent with a viewpoint, at least the viewpoint of the Wall Street Journal, criticism is made. I think in a way they've cherry-picked. I think if you look at the whole of the museum, if you're an average American who comes in, you come away with feeling of great pride in this country.
Mr. Heyman, you've been involved now in the redrafting of this. We're at revision number 5. Are you finally happy?
Oh, I'm much happier than I was when I saw the initial script. I think that this show has much more balance than it had previously. And I want to say that a good portion of the reason for that is the amount of time that the Legion has put in going over this line by line with the curators and the director.
And Mr. Detweiler, are you finally happy with this now?
No, we're not completely happy with it because we were only seeing a portion. We're talking now only about the script. There is a portion of the script that I believe has not even been completed, and I think that's section 000, which is, I believe, the first part of the exhibit. And besides that, you also have all the other things to go with it, the videos, the graphics, and so forth, which we haven't seen yet.
Well, it does sound, though, as you listen to the history of this, that they have caved in a bit, that every time you've complained about something, they've rewritten it, or if you didn't like the way certain artifacts were laid out, they removed them. What is there left to win?
Well, I don't think it's a question of caving in. That we have no actual control over what the curators or what the Smithsonian does with the script or with the exhibit. We have only come to made ourselves available and what expertise we have available to say we think so much of the institution that rather than just stand back and throw rocks, we're concerned enough to sit down and try to participate.
Mr. Detweiler, the first draft the first time out was, in your view, an abomination, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Now, if what the Smithsonian is saying to us, their representatives are saying, they're saying to us that that should have never gotten out. But we do know, based on, again, what they have told us, that that script was sent to the museums in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So obviously, that script was in a form that they had were going to use in some way. It may have been preliminary, but they let it out.
And I think you're also saying in this, if I may, that this reflects a view of historians that is inconsistent with the way you think history or this exhibition ought to look.
Our position is very simple. If the Enola Gay is going to be included, and there is going to be reference, and understand there's a cutout of the crew and so forth, you know, the picture that's taken right before the mission or right after the mission, if those people are going to be identified and if the plane is going to be included, we are concerned that the valor of those people is going to be dishonored. And that's our major concern. If they pull the Enola Gay out and pull the crew out, then that may be another exhibit that we can talk about.
Mr. Heyman, let me give you a chance to respond to that in a moment. We need to take a break first, and we'll continue our conversation. We'll be right back.
They started by shipping tires in 1930 and have been moving steadily ever since. Today, they ship cargo to all 50 states and 48 countries overseas. And with an annual revenue of over $4 billion, Roadway Services is one of the few select companies in the Dow Jones Transportation Average. Where do you find companies that keep moving? Actually, there's a list of them printed every day. NASDAQ, the stock market for the next 100 years.
In the years to come, thousands of people will be protected because of a significant innovation from Volvo. Volvo introduces the world's first side impact airbag. Drive safely.
Next time, live coverage of the signing of the historic peace treaty between Jordan and Israel.
Plus, the Reverend Billy Graham and his son Franklin on the next Good Morning America.
Here on ABC.
It's the best-selling full-size car in America, with over 5 million sold so far. And that's before we built this one. The Select Series Buick LeSabre, just $20,995. Here's to the next 5 million.
With the 1995 Buick Regal, we didn't reinvent the wheel. Actually, the wheels are about the only thing we didn't reinvent. The Select Series Buick Regal, new for $95 and just $19,195.
Congress used to be made up of real leaders who cared about the future of our country. But today, those folks in Washington could use a strong dose of Tennessee values. As your United States Senator, I'll fight for lower taxes, less government regulation, a balanced federal budget, and term limits for members of Congress. If you're fed up with the way the country's run, then change the people who run it.
Elect Bill Frist, U.S. Senate.
You get your pick, Mitzi. What the? I'm here to please, sweet squeeze. Not that doll face, the cars. It's the Hayes Mitsubishi You Get Your Pick sale. Either a 95 Galant or a 95 Eclipse, double rebated down to $12,888. Or pick this, a 94 Mighty Max pickup, just $78.88. Why buy the other guy's used when you can own new for less? Deals as sweet as a honeymoon. Oh, Dave, I hope it never ends. Is that why you never take off that dress? Uh-huh. We need to talk.
And we're back with Michael Heyman from the Smithsonian and William Detweiler of the American Legion. I wonder, Mr. Heyman, to what extent you think this might be a philosophical difference in this way, that what the Legion wants here is a memorial, a commemoration, and what the Smithsonian wanted was something else, was a history, and that sometimes those things are in conflict, and perhaps this is one of those times.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that one of the difficulties here was to choose a subject which arouses as much identification and passions as this subject does. And it's difficult to handle this in a way where people with different perspectives on what occurred will feel comfortable. Let me just say that as I piece this together, we finally had gotten around to restoring the Enola Gay. We decided that its exhibition at this time was an excellent one. It really stands for two things, the Enola Gay. One is that it was obviously the most instrumental airplane in ending a very brutal war between the United States and Japan. And the other was that it ushered in the use of atomic weapons. Both of those are extraordinary events connected with the Enola Gay. Now, showing both of those, creating a context for both, proves to be very, very difficult, but that's what we're seeking to do.
And Mr. Detweiler, the backside of that question, or the flip side of that question, it seems to me really is twofold. One, is the Smithsonian the right place for a memorial? Should it be a place where history is discussed? And maybe they shouldn't have taken this project on in the first place because they're never going to please you in that sense. And the other part of that, it seems to me, is, you know, there was some debate going on about the appropriateness of dropping the bomb and what the motivations were. That is not an absolute. There was discussion. And aren't you trying to eliminate all of that?
No.
No.
We're not trying to eliminate the fact that there was discussion. The Smithsonian's charge in its federal statute is to memorialize the deeds of the military in the showing of the exhibits and so forth. But at the same time, to try to discuss the pros and cons of whether the bomb should have been dropped or shouldn't have been dropped probably belongs someplace else, in a seminar or in some educational event. The way the exhibit was presented actually, and it may still do this, and there is some continuing bias in the script that we're looking at, and that's why I say that we're not happy. The script presents a situation, and the concern that we have is that when one child or a person walks out of that exhibit, that they do not walk out of that exhibit with the feeling that the American service people, that crew, that they were warmongers, bloodthirsty, or they were acting out of vengeance.
Mr. Heyman, I'm sure you don't want people to walk out of there with that impression either, but I wonder if you agree that the Smithsonian is not the place to engage in a moral debate.
Well, I'm finding that it's difficult to have a moral debate in the context of the Smithsonian. On the other hand, it does seem to me that when one is dealing with momentous events, showing a full picture of their occurrence, so long as it's unbiased and it's balanced, is a role for the Smithsonian.
Let's go back to the beginning here as we begin to wind this up. Mr. Heyman, is there a point at which you have to say enough is enough, and have you reached that point in dealing with whether it's the Legion or any other group that may have a bone to pick with you over this exhibition?
No, as far as I'm concerned, we'll continue to consult right up to the time the exhibition opens. And we will share as fully as we can with anyone who wishes, or at least within reason, what the videos will look like, what the artifacts will look like, what the feel will be of this show. So while I think we're getting narrower and narrower in terms of what must be shared in the future, we intend to continue to share the ingredients of the show.
But don't you at some point have to say, this is it? You may not like this, but this is the way it's going to open.
Well, of course one does. Eventually, one comes to a deadline for the show. But for instance, I think it's clear that we are not going to remove from this show the impact of the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that is a decision that has been made. Now one works within the parameters of each of those major decisions. And that's what I mean, that the areas of agreement and disagreement keep narrowing because the structure of the show takes on its final meanings.
And Mr. Detweiler, we've got about 45 seconds or so left. If you don't win on every major point, or you don't win enough, what do you do?
Our position is very clear. We are concerned to see that the valor of the U.S. servicemen is properly represented and properly presented in the exhibit. And the second thing is that we are concerned about the institution. And we will continue to monitor, we will continue to look. But again, there'll come a time when we too must make a decision as to whether to go back and to oppose actively the exhibit.
And that means what? You boycott it, you picket it, you call on Congress to fire Mr. Heyman? What do you do?
No, I think Mr. Heyman's a very nice person. We're not getting personal in this debate.
But you will boycott it if it comes to that?
We will take the measures within our purview and within our ability to oppose the exhibit, yes.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Can I just say one last thing, which is that I want to take every pain possible to make sure that the valor and courage of American servicemen in World War II is not besmirched.
Mr. Heyman, Mr. Detweiler, thanks a lot for joining us tonight. We appriciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll wrap it up in just a moment.